But there was one common thread through all that feedback, and there was, "Hey Marek, it was great. I'm absolutely terrified now." Hey, it's Marek. Imagine my horror. I was running, together with my colleague, Pete Townsend, I was running a workshop, a module 1 of a new training that we're developing. This was last week. I badly needed the whole workshop, the whole module to be recorded. I just needed voice recording of this one. The module ends. I look at my phone, and only 30 minutes out of the entire 3-hour workshop got recorded. What happens, and this is what I learned last week, is that when you use voice notes or voice memos on your iOS device, they will stop recording if a phone call comes in. And somebody was trying to call me during the workshop. Half an hour into the workshop, my phone was on silent. I did not notice. I didn't look at the screen of my phone. 3 hours of workshop finished. That's when I look at the screen of my phone, and I only have 30 minutes of the recording. Absolutely annoying. I really, really needed that recording. Thankfully, that module that we were running was massively oversubscribed. We had about 200 people who signed up for the module. Only 20 could join the first edition, so we're going to be running other editions. We had a repeat edition earlier this week while I'm recording this one, and thankfully the recording worked and I was able to use it. Why am I telling you this one? It's a new course that we're running. We don't need to care about the details, but I'm sort of proud of the course. It's called Vibe Coding for the non-technical professional. We're teaching people how to create applications using this vibe coding approach. Of course, we're covering everything that's required for people to know, including all the pitfalls of vibe coding, all the security issues, how to create applications that are actually safe to use. Does not matter for this podcast. What matters is the fact that I needed to record the 3 hours of the first module that we were running. Why was I doing this? And this is the focus of the podcast today. It's because this was a way for Pete and myself to create a handbook for the course. So this podcast is slightly different than all the previous episodes that you listened to, in that it is a podcast episode in which I'm, rather than talking about some high-level trends, what's happening in the world of AI, I'm sharing how I work, how I use AI to make my life, my work life, easier. And so that's what's happening here. Pete and I running a course. We don't have a handbook. We're only testing that course with those people who subscribed or who signed up for the course. So we don't have the handbook yet. And instead of writing the handbook for the course, the moment we go to the market with that course, we will definitely need the handbook. Instead of writing the handbook for the course, we decided that the handbook already exists. It's just not on paper. And this is a mindset that we have in my team, where we believe that some of the artifacts that we need to create already exist. We just need some help from AI to extract them. I call this approach the capture mode, and this really started with a lot of meetings that we had in our team, and we realized that often when we're having a juicy discussion, somebody around the table asks, are we recording it? Are we capturing it? And that "are we capturing it" phrase has become so common in my team that right now I call it the capture mode. Why are we asking this question? Because, just taking notes by hand is sometimes not enough for what we're doing. When we're capturing our meetings using voice, sometimes even video, we are able to extract a lot of information, a lot of artifacts from those meetings. So here's what happens. We're running that module 3 hours. Pete Townsend, myself, in front of the room. We both have lapel microphones attached to our shirts. Those lapel microphones capture what we say. They don't necessarily capture what's happening in the room, which is good because we want our participants to feel comfortable while we're doing what we're doing. And then over those 3 hours, we're sharing stories, we're telling people how they should be doing things on their computers. We bump into all sorts of problems. Some participants get stuck, we get them unstuck. Some other participants ask a question, we answer this question. In the end, we have a recording that's pretty much a handbook, just not in a handbook format. And so after the 3 hours of the recording, I took the voice recording, transcribed it. I had a pretty large text file. Then I uploaded this transcription into Claude Cowork. I prefer to use Claude Cowork over, say, a regular Claude chat, simply because it gives me a bit more power. I can, add files to my projects as we go while Claude is working on some of my prompts. So I could add some additional information. They get queued up and Claude sort of picks those messages up as it processes my other prompts. So that's really, really good. So basically what I did is I transcribed what we have recorded, and then I went to Claude Cowork, and I said, hey, here's a transcription of the 3-hour workshop. I need you to turn it into a participant handbook. Make sure that everything that a typical handbook contains is there. Do not worry too much about formatting or visual aspects of it, because Pete is the principal designer in my team. Pete will take care of making sure that it all looks good. Just make sure that the content is right. And so we get into this exchange of prompts with Claude Cowork. And the first thing that Claude Cowork notices is that that transcription contains not only the participant handbook, but it also contains what Claude would refer to as facilitator notes. The chatbot tells me, hey, in the transcript, I also found some conversations that you and Pete had, which are pointing to some things that you need to remember about for future editions. Not something that your participants need to know, but that's something that you need to keep in mind. Okay, so I said, let's do 2 documents then, a participant handbook and also facilitator notes. So what happens then? Claude starts to produce those documents. This is where it starts to get interesting, because if I just took those documents as Claude would create them, this could cause all sorts of problems. Turns out that those chatbots are not perfect. Here's an example. During the course, I was explaining to participants that if they need to install a particular piece of software, and they need to install it using text interfaces such as Windows Terminal or Windows PowerShell, the installation command will be different when they use Windows Terminal, and it'll be different when they use Windows PowerShell. Whereas Claude Cowork, while it was preparing the participant handbook, somehow conflated those two. I told it to verify all the information online and so on, and it told me that it found this information online which said that the command is the same for Terminal and PowerShell. That's not true. So I said, hey, no, that's not the case. Claude pushed back, saying that it has verified the sources. Turns out it was likely a hallucination. I think Claude wasn't able to access the page where it had the information and just made it up. I am an expert here. I know what I'm saying. So I pushed back again. I said, no. I showed it a screenshot from a webpage, said, here's the information. I didn't really need to force it in this way with screenshots, but I thought, hey, just for some integrity in the conversation, I'm going to share that as well. And of course, Claude apologized in the usual way. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry I made this mistake. Let me correct that. My point is, you still need human expertise while you're doing what you're doing. In this case, preparing those 2 pieces of the document. So time-wise, the whole process took about 2 hours, give or take, about 20-odd iterations. So, me spotting something in the document, making a correction. The first hour, it was just myself and Claude. And then after that 1 hour, I grabbed the 2 documents, moved to Pete's desk, and we did a bit of a pair review. So Pete and I were looking at the same document. Pete gave me some additional perspective. Pete has a different perspective to this course. So I have been doing vibe coding for quite a bit of time. I used to manage teams of software developers. I used to write software code myself. So I am deep into those topics, whereas Pete has started vibe coding only just a couple of months ago. It was actually really important for us to have those two perspectives, so Pete can see things that I cannot, and the other way around. So we looked at the document, the two of us, we had some additional changes. All in all, about 20 odd iterations, and we got our participant handbook and facilitator notes ready. The participant handbook, once produced, once sort of exported to a document, it's 44 pages long. The facilitator notes are about 9 pages long. These are PDF documents that we now have. So I got Claude to generate MD files. MD stands for Markdown, so a simplified formatting approach that Pete could take and then turn into something beautiful, seeing where the headings are, where call-out boxes are, where some tables are, and so on. That was all in the Markdown file, and then Pete made it beautiful. So about 2 hours for content creation. Normally, it would take us probably about 2 days to create those 44 pages plus 9 pages. 2 hours. The design part didn't squeeze at all. It was still human. It was still human work. It also didn't grow. So I did ask Pete explicitly whether, there was any extra work because this was an artifact that came from Claude. Pete clearly said no extra work. The actual structured documents were beautiful, very easy to work with, but still, there's a bit of human work that needs to be happening there. We are looking into some ways of speeding up the creation of the beautifully designed document, but at this stage, we have this massive saving in time in one part of the process, a bit less or no savings at all in the other parts of the process. So something for you to learn about, and I'm going to start to abstract or try to explain how this could apply in other types of artifacts, not just course training materials. Just in a second. Before I do that, though, there was something really interesting that was happening during the workshop. While Pete and I were running the workshop, we found ourselves talking to the future bot. So imagine we're explaining something to the participants, and we're saying, hey, here's a common mistake that a lot of people do. And then we would say, sort of toward the microphone, saying, hey, bot, remember to make sure you clearly captured that part in the handbook. So it's like prompt injection. We're doing the recording, but inside that recording of what's happening in the room, we're also recording specific instructions, not for participants, but for whatever AI bot is going to be analyzing that. I remember I had another session a few weeks earlier with a large organization who were running a full-day workshop. And during that workshop, which we were also recording, somebody got up and started drawing things on the whiteboard and talking about those things. I remember explicitly then pausing everyone and saying, hey, bot, Lucy, or whoever it was, Lucy just drew a couple of boxes on the whiteboard. They're connected. And so I was basically explaining what everyone else in the room could see, but the bot wouldn't be able to because we're only doing voice recording. So a new behavior is emerging here in this approach to work that we do at the moment. So once you have that, right? Once you capture everything, once you realize that you could be using that to create completely new types of artifacts, once you realize that you could talk to the future bot, the future AI system, or the AI system that's going to be reading all those transcripts in the future, this is when we can start talking about the generalization of that. Pretty much in every industry, if you're doing this sort of white-collar work where you need to create all sorts of artifacts from your work, this is the assumption. The artifact that you need to create already exists in the work that you're doing. And if the work that you're doing involves some form of expression, whether it's voice, whether it's something else, you need to capture that. And then you can use AI to help you extract the artifact that you need from that captured material. In our case, we extracted the handbook from a recording of the workshop. You're teaching, you're pretty much producing those handbooks all the time. Some of my colleagues, when they jump on a sales call and they discuss terms of a particular offer, all the details and so on, they record those sales calls because the artifact that they need, a sales proposal, is emerging in this conversation. When you have a sales call, a sales proposal is hidden in the conversation. You just need AI to extract it. When you lead a board meeting notes might be hiding in the recordings of the conversations, right? Everyone running boards now suddenly gets scared. Oh, so are we recording our board meetings at the moment? What if, the system hallucinates? No. First of all, when it comes to recording, your choice, whether this is something you're comfortable with. When it comes to hallucinations and so on, you still need to review everything. I gave you an example of creating a handbook where there was a mistake. It's still faster to create those, but you need to be involved in that review. When you're debugging, looking for issues, whether it's in software or maybe you're simply looking for issues in construction sites, you could be producing an incident report while you work. In fact, the original post that's giving rise to this particular podcast is something that I also recorded. I was walking my dog, and for 45 minutes, I was just talking to myself, and then captured that transcript and worked with that transcript to shape the post capture mode. That's the title of the post. That's on my Substack and that's on my LinkedIn. It's still my words. It's still, words written by myself. It was not a prompt where I said, hey, write me that particular post. But I had a transcript and I had a prompt that said, hey, help me clean up that transcript, and then I'll start working on my post. Very, very helpful. So why am I running this podcast the way I'm running it today? Why is there a topic which is very much focused on how I work and not some big idea that I usually talk about? That's because last week I was given a keynote to a large room of board directors and board secretaries. And everyone loved my keynote. I heard so many nice things from people after the keynote. But there was one common thread through all the feedback. And there was, hey, Marek, it was great. I'm absolutely terrified now. And it's something that has bothered me since, because, look, I'm a possibilist. I believe that with the technology that we have access to at the moment, we can do great things. I need to show scary things to people because I need to show them what could possibly go wrong. But ultimately, I want to be sharing all those great stories, all the business value that can be derived from algorithms, artificial intelligence. So I decided, hey, maybe I should be a tiny bit more boring every now and then and talk about some daily activities where people could just learn from how I work and learn from how others work. So I'll be probably spending a bit more time trying to understand how others use AI in those daily, very sometimes small types of activities to share them with you. So that's the first episode that has a prefix to the title that says how I work. You might be seeing this coming out quite regularly from now on, because I have received some pretty positive feedback about this new format from my newsletter readers, so those who read rather than listen to what I have to say. Capture mode. Whenever you're catching up with your team, whenever you're working on something tomorrow, next week, ask yourself, am I capturing this? Could there be an artifact hidden in what I'm doing at the moment that I might need in the future? It might be quite useful. If you're not comfortable with Claude reading your transcripts, and if you need a local so-called pipeline or approach to analyzing this information on your local machine, I do have a solution. I'll just have to figure out how to share it. It might need to be a newsletter rather than a podcast recording. I just cannot figure out how to share so much technical information in a podcast, but maybe I will. In case I don't, sign up. Make sure you follow my newsletter as well. In the meantime, thanks for listening to me. Stay curious.